Training.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
You might be a tailgater.
If your day is not complete until Tall Tales starts at 4 p.m., you might be a tailgater. If every time you laugh, you now sound like the real Joe, you might be a tailgater. If you don't like Fridays because Tall Tales is not on during the weekend, you might be a tailgater.
Tune in to Tall Tales with me, Bob Klitzkie, Monday through Friday at 4 p.m., only on 93.3 FM. And you, too, can become a tailgater.
Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Landfall along the Texas coastline. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Having reached hurricane strength in just the last few hours, what had been Tropical Storm Nicholas has now come ashore on the Texas coastline, about 25 miles southwest of Freeport, Texas.
We are definitely feeling the impact here in Galveston. I'm having an extremely difficult time trying to stand up with these heavy rain and wind. These winds are extremely strong right now.
That's Fox 26 reporter Tiffany Justice, who's trying to stand up in Galveston, Texas. More than 82,000 customers are already without power. Secretary of State Antony Blinken testifying remotely to the House Foreign Affairs Committee Monday, defending the withdrawal from Afghanistan as the Taliban rapidly returned to power.
The evacuation itself was an extraordinary effort under the most difficult conditions imaginable by our diplomats, by our military, by our intelligence professionals.
But Texas Republican Congressman Michael McCall told the secretary it was an unmitigated disaster.
I never thought in my lifetime that I would see an unconditional surrender to the Taliban.
Secretary Blinken acknowledged Americans were left behind in the withdrawal. 3 Republican members of the committee called on him to resign. President Biden stopping off in Oregon Monday for an update on wildfires in several western states.
These fires are blinking code red for our nation. They're gaining frequency and ferocity, and we know what we have to do.
The president said while forest management decisions have played a part in the wildfires, he blamed climate change for what he called supercharging them. The president stopped in Oregon on his way to California to campaign against the recall of Governor Gavin Newsom. State police in southwestern Utah have closed a section of Interstate 15 in both directions, trying to find a gunman who they say fled on foot after firing on officers during a traffic stop. America is listening to Fox News.
Here at Guam Auto Spot, we have the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars, like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage, as low as $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Or this 2021 Buick Encore, as low as $237 per paycheck, 0 down for 72 months. Call 478-AUTO to schedule a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
You know all those amazing photos and videos saved on your camera roll capturing your love for Guam? We want to see it. Log on to visitguam.com/Instaguam to submit your best moments for a chance to win weekly prizes. The Guam Visitors Bureau will choose a weekly winner, so share your love for our island paradise now and win. Brought to you by GVB. Thank you for making Guam a better place to live, work, and visit.
The search for the definitive cause for the coronavirus continues amid reports that some scientists have potentially unethical ties.
There are more questions surrounding the inner workings of China's mysterious Wuhan Institute of Virology after a new investigation reveals 26 well-known scientists across the globe have, in some cases, ties to the controversial lab. In February 2020, a group of 27 scientists from Australia to the United States published an open letter in the Lancet Medical Journal, quashing the idea that COVID-19 came from behind the walls of the Wuhan Institute as part of a lab leak. More than a year and a half later, the Daily Telegraph in London reports 26 of the 27 either have ties to employees or gave speeches and other professional services.
Fox's David Spont, Dr. Anthony Fauci has consistently denied the U.S. helped to fund research at the Wuhan Virology Lab. A federal judge in Iowa has told the state it cannot enforce its new state law preventing school districts from mandating masks in the classroom. County and local governments in Florida have been warned not to try and mandate vaccinations vaccines for government workers. Governor Ron DeSantis says it's a violation of state law. At least 2 Florida counties say they'll go ahead with the mandates. It's decades in prison for the person convicted in the bombing of a mosque in Minnesota 4 years ago.
A judge sentenced Emily Claire Hari, formerly known as Michael Hari, to 53 years in prison Monday. Hari recently said she's transgender. The sentencing judge said evidence clearly showed Hari's intent was to scare, intimidate, and terrorize individuals of Muslim faith. No one was hurt in the attack on Dar al-Farouk Islamic Center in Bloomington, but mosque members asked the judge to impose a life sentence. Investigators say Hari led a group called the White Rabbits. She was convicted in December. 2 co-defendants are awaiting sentencing. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It's so easy to read those words with a degree of emphasis, you know, Jose?
Absolutely, especially when they make perfect sense.
Absolutely. All right, Second Amendment. We go from Second Amendment straight to Zemi Ikotni. Yeah, so we start out with the Daily News. The headline on today's editorial, Our View, we need to follow basic precautions to stop illness. Basic precautions, like putting roadblocks out in Marine Corps Drive and making sure that anybody in the bar business or the restaurant business is primed to declare involuntary bankruptcy. Yeah. Basic precautions. Shut down the island, kill the economy, scare the pants off everybody if you can, that if you don't get vaccinated, well, you won't be vaccinated. Governor Lou Leon Guerrero described Guam's latest Wuhan virus numbers as alarming on Monday, as the community struggles in its fight against the Delta variant of the virus. 9 new deaths were reported, including 8 over the weekend and 1 from last week. Of these, at least 5 people were dead on arrival. Now, how can that happen? Yeah, this morning my neighbor woke up. He felt fine. He went out and played around the golf, came home, watched a little TV, had lunch, And then he said, I don't feel so good. Call the ambulance. He climbed in the ambulance and died.
But on arrival.
On arrival, yeah. And there's a news story here that ran in the Daily News. The COVID-19 patients pronounced dead on arrival at the island's hospital in recent weeks likely did not realize their bodies were being starved of oxygen. Now, you know, it used to be really popular to say when you were in a situation of stress to say, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Yeah, their bodies were being starved of oxygen, killing them, according to Guam Memorial Hospital Dr. Jolene Uggan. She said oxygen saturation levels of less than 95% mean it's time to seek medical care. Now, that's that, if you've ever been in a doctor's office and they put that little pincher on your index finger. Of course, they never want to tell you what those numbers are. And if they do, they don't want you to know what they mean. You took my blood pressure. What is it? It's okay. Well, what are the numbers? Well, it's not a problem. What's my blood oxygen level? Well, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah. If it's less than 95, you need to go into the hospital because you qualify for treatments that improve mortality. Now, how do you improve mortality?
Make it quicker?
I guess. Or more deadly. No, you can't make it more deadly than it already is, right? Said Uggan, who is the hospital's associate administrator for medical services. 9 more people on island have died of Wuhan virus, according to the Department of Public Harassment and Social Secret Services. That increases the total number of Wuhan virus-related deaths on Guam to 168, including the Andrew Camacho syndrome folks and the guy who was decapitated in a motorcycle accident. They never found his body, but he tested positive for Wuhan virus, so he counts.
You know, a better perspective, if they would classify this by the year or incorporate other deaths on island from other causes.
Exactly.
Just to put in perspective.
Exactly. Just over the weekend, we had 8 deaths. More than half were dead on arrival. We've been seeing that pattern. Well, just don't bring people to the hospital then, maybe, huh? Said Ann Probutsky, territorial epidemiologist for public health. She said the 9th person is someone who died last week, previously unknown to health officials. Probutsky said 26 people, including 3 fully vaccinated people, have died of Wuhan virus since cases started to surge in recent months. The vast majority of these deaths have been people arriving at the hospital dead on arrival. Governor Lujan Guerrero said she's not implementing further restrictions at this time, but is considering a ban on people arriving at the hospital dead on arrival. The current protective measures are adequate, she said. This will eventually turn around, the governor said. We're doing all that we can to protect our people, and I'm asking our people, please cooperate. This will, as you were, we feel that with the measures in place, with 83% vaccinated in the community, we feel that we continue employing these measures and try to protect our island as much as we can and try to get some normalcy as much as we can. Lujan Guerrero said it's important to return to the basics, including wearing masks, social distancing, frequent hand washing, staying home when you're feeling sick, and getting vaccinated. While fully vaccinated individuals can still get the virus and require hospitalization, they had far less risk of severe illness or death, the governor said. They recovered quicker, and they're least likely to spread the virus. Alexander Wheelard, chief medical officer at Guam Regional Medical City, said vaccinated patients with Wuhan virus typically are hospitalized for less than a week, while unvaccinated patients typically are hospitalized for several weeks. He said difficulty breathing and low oxygen levels are the twin triggers for hospitalization. Difficulty breathing and low oxygen levels. People with body aches and fevers and runny nose and cough, those are the things that are all within the usual course of illness. But where it takes another turn and really requires hospitalization is where you have trouble breathing, where it starts to affect your lungs and oxygen levels decrease. It can attack just about every organ system in the body, said Uggan. Patients can come in with acute strokes. They can come in with heart attacks. They can come in with everything that we could normally have without a virus. And it's just because there's no oxygen going to these tissues. This virus is very dangerous. It's very aggressive. Uggan said every household should have a pulse oximeter. Washer, dryer, microwave, right? Pulse oximeter, right? Which is a device placed on your fingertip that uses light beams to estimate the amount of oxygen in the blood. And there's another article that ran on KUAM. And this quotes Uggan again. And she talks again about the breath and respiratory failure. And she says, if you have silent hypoxia, Uggan said, you won't feel that your oxygen level is low. You have no idea that your oxygen levels are critically low in your tissues. And so the advice that I give to the community is, if you test positive for Wuhan virus, you should purchase a pulse oximeter, which measures your oxygen level. A pulse oximeter. The doctor said an oxygen level below 95 is already cause for concern. She told the story of a patient who had an oxygen level of 65, but whose main complaint was not shortness of breath, but fatigue. She goes on to say, patients come in with acute strokes. They come in with heart attacks. They can come in with everything you could normally have without a virus. And it's just because there's no oxygen getting to those tissues, and that's the bottom line. So if by the 5th day you're starting to feel more short of breath, please get a pulse oximeter. Check your oxygen saturation. I'm convinced. Where do I go to buy a pulse oximeter, Jose?
I have a better idea.
Uh-huh.
Instead of all these All Rise Acts and Rise programs, how about you just pass out a pulse oximeter to everybody who tests positive?
Not a bad idea.
You think?
Yeah, not a bad idea. Maybe pass them out to everybody.
How about mandate it because it works so well?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to know where I could get a pulse oximeter.
They're easy to get. They're just like, they're talking about it as if it's the...
Tall Tales is brought to you by Oximeter Incorporated, the maker of gold oximeters, silver oximeters, and rust oximeters.
You will breathe a sigh of relief.
Buy one of our oximeters and you will breathe a sigh of relief. That's better than my hemorrhoids commercial. You remember my...
Do I want to hear it?
You probably don't want to hear my hemorrhoids commercial again. Yeah. So where can I buy a pulse oximeter, Jose?
I'm sure all the major pharmacies have it.
Really?
I'm guessing it's easy to get on Amazon. I have one.
You do?
I've had one for a while, not because of Wuhan, but because it's just easy to get.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. The pharmacies, Kmart should have them.
Wow.
Yeah. They're little tiny things that just put on your finger.
Yeah, I know. I've seen them in a doctor's office, but does it transmit to your phone, or how do you read it?
It just there's a display on it.
Right on the pincher, huh?
Right on the pincher.
Uh-huh.
And then some people have it on their smartphones, like their little Fitbit things, and Apple iPhone, I think, has it also.
Yeah.
Some different phones for the Android have it. I mean, watches. I'm sorry, watches have it.
My new watch doesn't have it on it.
Yours tells time, which is most important for a watch to do.
It used to be. That used to be the reason that people had watches, so they know what time it was. That's just a minor aspect of having a watch nowadays. Yeah.
Here, Dick Tracy had an oximeter on his wrist.
Dick Tracy, when we saw Dick Tracy with his radio watch, we thought we'll never have anything like that. Now we do. Okay, I want to go back into the finish up the editorials here. Finish up Jimmy Cudney. And I'll get to R. Carl as soon as I finish this up. He probably wants to talk about how dangerous it is not to have an oximeter. The island has had 168 deaths since the start of the pandemic. This will eventually turn around. We do not need a law in place as it were. Although social distancing is no longer required by executive order, we know is a basic way of stopping the spread of Wuhan virus. We do not need a law in place mandating common sense. You want to bet? The other easy way to prevent serious illness is by getting vaccinated. Vaccines are free and readily available to those 12 and older. Vaccines will stop you from going to the hospital, will stop you from getting very sick. And then we have medications that will actually help save your life if for any reason you get to the point where you end up in the hospital. In addition, people can help spread a virus if they stay home when they feel ill. As of Sunday night, there were more than 2,700 active cases of Wuhan virus on the island, and more than 12,000 cases have been reported here since the pandemic began. We have the tools to prevent more sickness and death. It's up to us to use them. Keep your distance, wash your hands, wear your masks, get vaccinated. Okay, I'm going to go to the Post next. And it looks like an antitrust violation here, because the Post headline on the Post editorial is "Don't delay seeking medical help for prolonged fatigue, difficulty breathing." So I'm going to hold off on that, and I'm going to entertain R. Carl, who wants to talk about comorbidities. And Drive-Through Jack wants to talk about the pulse oximeter. Maybe maybe as you drive through, you just stick your finger out the window and there's a pulse oximeter there, so you can get your blood oxygen reading along with your fish switch. We'll go to R. Carl first and then Drive-Through Jack. The most dangerous man in the room, talking about comorbidities.
Hey, good afternoon, Bob.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to inject a thought into the conversation that there's never any discussion about these people that are dying. What are the comorbidities contributing them? Because I've heard, of discussion among some pretty intelligent people who have inspected the death data in the mainland, and almost all the people they looked at had comorbidities. And I think that's one reason why the military has very low death rate, because the process they put people through in order to enter the military filters out people with these problems. One of the most common comorbidities is obesity. There's diabetes. There's hypertension. And a number of others, and there's no discussion about that. Everyone is kind of all lumped together. And I'd like to inject the idea, which is often discussed, but I think it's kind of lightly glossed over, and that is the most common, what I believe, the most common silent comorbidity that is kind of glossed over is a low vitamin D. There's a survey that was published by Healthline, and that is an excellent website. They've got a full staff of consulting doctors, medical professionals. It's very well done. It's got about 200 million views or visits a month, so it's extremely popular and very science-based. And this particular survey that they published, or not survey, but study, concluded that 42% of Americans are vitamin D deficient. 69.2% of Hispanic Americans are vitamin D deficient. 82.1% of Black Americans are vitamin D deficient. And the reason why Hispanics and Black Americans have a higher rate of vitamin D deficiency is because higher melanin in the skin slows down creation of vitamin D in the system.
So even vitamin D is an example of systemic racism, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, there's some excellent talks given by Dr. John Campbell on his YouTube channel by that same name, Dr. John Campbell. He's British, very science-oriented. He goes over the studies, and he, in a few of them, he talked about what the studies have shown about what vitamin D does for the immune system. And one of the many things it does, probably the most critical thing it does, is it is a critical factor in helping the immune system create factors that that help the body not to spin into this inflammatory overreaction, the dreaded cytokine storm that sends people into hospital ICUs and onto ventilators. And the vitamin D is extremely critical in this process. And I recently saw a short video by Dr. Campbell on what studies have shown about zinc. And it was a long list of things. I knew zinc was kind of important, but I never really supplemented much with zinc. But I went down, as soon as I watched this thing, I went down to the local vitamin store, Vitamin World, and I found a very good zinc, which is chelated, and chelation is a process that helps the zinc to be absorbed into the body, because there's some types of zinc and other minerals, if they're not chelated or they're a certain form, they're not absorbed. It doesn't matter what you take, it matters what your body takes in. But there's never any talk about any of this. It's always the same old run and hide strategy. And of those 600,000 plus people who died, I think it might be over 700,000 now, how many of them social distance, washed their hands, did all these precautionary things, and they still got it? And from the beginning, I've tried to take the fatalistic attitude that this is a very infectious disease. The Delta variant is much, much more infectious. It's got about 1,000 times. One study showed it's got 1,000 times the viral load. When you breathe out, it's got that much more of the virus in it being expelled. So I've tried to take the fatalistic attitude. There's more than a 50% chance I'm going to get this thing at some point. And the best thing I can do, I guess social distancing, and that stuff, masking. But also on top of that, and I think much more critically important, is prepare your immune system if you can. If your immune system isn't damaged or in some way compromised where you have no other choice, then I think it's just important to try and strengthen your immune system. And there's no talk about that at all. And there's no education on comorbidities, or very little.
Yeah. So, Carl, this is my understanding of vitamins. That the definition of a vitamin is that it is a chemical compound, the absence of which in the human diet will cause the onset of certain diseases. As an example, no vitamin C, scurvy. That's why British sailors are called limeys. They found that if they would just suck on limes, they wouldn't get scurvy, and so on with the others, except for vitamin D, which is actually a hormone. And hormones, of course, are necessary for all different kinds of regulations in the body. I've been a believer in vitamin D for a long time, and I'd have to say that the results that I get from having a pretty high level of vitamin D are pretty good. The other thing that nobody wants to talk about, they talk about comorbidities, but no one wants to talk about the fact that if your body mass is up around 35, if the Wuhan virus doesn't get you, something else will. That if you're diabetic, you're a walking comorbidity, just waiting for the virus to come around and visit you. If you smoke, if you are a heavy drinker, etc. If we were really concerned about, avoiding deaths from these things, that would be a really good place to start, but it wouldn't be anywhere near as much fun. And of course, the drama factor would be completely drained out of it, and it wouldn't be popular. It wouldn't be popular to tell people you can't eat as much sweets as you want unless you want to be diabetic. Correct, Carl?
Yeah, I was at the health food store one time, and someone there mentioned that they were shaking their heads because they said they were talking to someone who was concerned about the virus, and they were recommending, well, would you like to look at what we have, as far as vitamin D and zinc and, maybe one or two other things that might help. And he said, no, that's all right. I've got the vaccine. So
yeah.
It's become kind of a substitute for healthy living,
yeah.
A healthy lifestyle.
When we came up with the cholesterol limiting drugs, right after, the usual conversation was, I'm taking Lipitor, pass the bacon.
Yes.
Got to take a break, Carl. Thanks for sharing.
All right, Bob. Talk to you later. Bye.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
And now, back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So here we are again, and we go now straight to the drive-in at an undisclosed drive-through restaurant, at an undisclosed location to entertain drive-through Jack. Go for it, Jack.
How you doing today, Bob?
Great.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in on the post-ox indicator or machine, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, back at an old hospital about a decade ago, you would see the CNAs, those certified nurses assistants that go around taking the vitals for the patient, and they used to push around this little machine on a stand that took your temperature, your blood pressure, and your oxygen level. And it's that little thing that you put in your finger. Yeah, you can buy those at any durable equipment, medical equipment supplier. So that's like at Isla Home Infusion or MedFarm or any one of those healthcare providers that sell durable equipment such as walkers, crutches, you name it, anything that has to do with medical supplies, you could get it there. The way I understood it is, you know, you could get one, but you really should get it if you're O2 dependent. So if you have like an oxygen concentrator or you require oxygen and stuff, that's when you should get it. This is the first time I've ever heard of getting it because you have flu-like symptoms, but I guess that's what they're. I don't know. I have no idea why they recommend that you buy one. They are kind of cheap and they are kind of expensive depending which one you get. It's like a car. You know, you either get the basic model, which runs about maybe $60, to the high-range model that takes everything from your temperature, whether your sexual appetite, I don't know what you want to call it, that runs like $1,000-some bucks. So it ranges. But the way I understood it is that it's not an independent item that you'd buy by itself. It usually is an item that's used with like an O2 concentrator or portable oxygen. Or you know, if you suffer from sleep apnea, a CPAP or something like that. That's the way I understood it. Now that was that's a couple of years ago, and I know this because a relative of mine needed it, and you know I was responsible for getting the equipment and anything that they needed for home care. So it's just those little bits of knowledge. But I wanted to call in because you know there's an awful trend now that's going along that's you know being overly critical. I'm putting the term lightly on the unvax. So recently Howard Stern came out and did a tirade on it, and Jimmy Kimmel did it. And what the mainstream social media seems to be doing is silencing the people that want to call them out on it. So they're either blocking them, saying that their post or their whatever kind of social media post or news that they're putting on is either bullying or violates their content policy, but they blatantly put out, you know, what Howard Stern said about the unvax, and I don't have to repeat the foul language that he uses, and what Jimmy Kimmel recently described in his show about how to treat the unvax. They should die. They're not worth treating. That if there's a choice between a vax person coming in needing the emergency care and unvax, good luck, Wheezy, or some sort of things like that. And any sort of a comment about what they said is instantly blocked or flagged as being violating rules and regulations to their site and stuff like that. So this is an awful trend that's happening now, and you know, I don't think there's any cure for that. And you know, we just have to be vigilant on it. And another thing that I wanted to talk to you about, it yesterday, is the news coming out of Afghanistan about the drone hit that President Biden issued. Now the word coming down the pipe, or the scuttlebutt, like the Navy like to call it, the rumors, is that it killed innocent people, a lot of innocent people, a social worker and his family. And the reason why I want to ask you this is could this be considered a high crimes and misdemeanors under the Constitution?
Yeah, it could. You're talking about an impeachable offense?
Yes.
Yeah, it certainly could. You could look at impeachable offenses in two ways. In a formalistic way, you know, sort of like the way a prosecutor would look at the elements of a crime, or the realpolitik way, which says that when a majority of the representatives in the House of Representatives find any reason, it's an impeachable offense. Trump was impeached twice on the grounds of crappy personality. One time even after he was out of office.
Yes. So I was just wondering, because the media news that the drone hit was, I mean, the president came out and said that it was a success, that they got their target. But now the news is coming out. The New York Times is reporting it. You know, a lot of the media in the East Coast are reporting it. Yeah, a lot of outside media, such as Sky News, is reporting that no, this was not the kind of precise drone hit that President Biden was describing. This had actually a lot of collateral damage, especially it's supposed to be a worker, an aid worker, and his family just got wiped out off the face of the earth. And the reason why I'm asking is because, like I said, the president came out and said this is what happened. He ordered it. He directed it. It was a success, and it hit. There was no collateral damage. It hit the target. And the news that are coming out and down the pipeline now that it wasn't. So I'm just wondering, is this a high crimes and misdemeanor which the president can be impeached, and by what route, since the Republicans don't hold the majority of the House of Reps, you know, and nobody's really talking about it.
Impeachment is not a judicial proceeding; it's a political proceeding.
Yeah, understood.
So when you said that Biden said something that wasn't accurate, factual, or true, you probably should have been watching as I clutched my pearls, Jack.
Yeah. So, but the result of that. So not only were we talking about what he said, but the result of the action, whether the action is impeachable. I don't know. You know, it's not American soil. I couldn't make heads or tails of it. I mean, we went through Benghazi. What happened to Benghazi? Nothing really was done there. It seems that whatever happens outside well, it doesn't really matter now since the media controls the narrative, right? So even what's going on in California, you know, the last ballot hasn't been even cast, and
well, you know how that's going to turn out. That guy Larry Elder is such a champion of white supremacy. You know,
well, anyways, Bob, those are just a few questions that I was, you know, hoping that you could, you know, shed some light on, but especially how the unvaxxers are being treated, and how the media and social networking is handling the response of these criticisms, because, you know, it's just a shame that, you know, I don't sweat anything that people says. I don't even sweat what the governor says, but when you put it in the light that, hey, you know, like Dr. Freeman would say, we're going to treat these people, and then we're not going to treat these people, then you've crossed the line. And I think that that we're in a dangerous time here, not because of this vaccination or this vax versus the unvax. We're talking about politics. They say science is the one that guides them. It's not. It's politics. It's politics that's ruining everything that we have to, you know, whatever day we're going through. It seems that everybody's claiming that science is there on their side, data is on their side, but a lot of people don't realize.
You know what, Jack?
Yeah.
Jack, I'm clean. Some of my best friends are unvaccinated.
Yeah.
Gotta let you go. Our Carl
All right,
wants to
Bob.
get
Have
back
a great
on.
day.
Okay, Jack. Drive through, Jack. So we're got just about 2 minutes before the next break here. Our Carl is itching to get back on. So go for it, our Carl.
Hey, Bob, I just won't take that long anyway. I just wanted to add one more thought to that, what I said about vitamin D. I take it so seriously that I actually, when I was having my checkup, which I hadn't had in quite a while, when the doctor ordered a blood test, I asked him if he could include vitamin D on the requisition that he sent to the local lab. It slips my name. The name of the lab slips right now, but and he did add it on. I had to pay out of pocket, but it's that important. I know a friend who has a wife who looks completely normal, but she found out that she had a genetic issue that resulted in her having abnormally low vitamin D levels. And I think one issue is that people think that, oh, vitamin D, you know, I know it's important. You know, I get out in the sun for a few minutes, walk into my car, and, you know, I take a multivitamin. But the problem with multivitamins is they take several days to process through the body, 3 or more days, several more days, longer than that it can take. It's got to through the kidneys, and then it has to go through the liver before it's in a usable form, that kind of hormone-like form that you talked about. And so it's really a different thing than what is produced with sun contact on the skin. Anyway, you know, I'm not a doctor. I can't say what your vitamin D level should be in your blood. I recommend Googling it and seeing what some place like the National Institutes of Health say is a safe level or a healthy level, and you know, and just confirm. I don't think it's worth rolling the dice on something that important as your vitamin D levels. Anyway, just a thought.
Okay, Carl.
All right, Bob. Talk to you later.
So long.
Bye-bye.
So we had a caller that hung up, Jose.
Oh, she just wanted to thank us for talking about what we're talking about. She went and called her local pharmacy, and they just got a shipment in of pulse oximeters. So she's on her way to get one right now.
All right.
They do range. I know Jack was talking about the Cadillac of oximeters.
Yeah.
But they range from like $5 to under $20 for what you need. And again, it's a simple device. They've been talking about oxygen levels since the beginning of this pandemic because obviously it involves your lungs. And you know, if the hospitals are saying that's what's going to take to detect it, you know, if you do test positive, then get one. Stop talking about it. Give it to everybody. Tell them where to get one at.
Okay, Jose. All right, so let's take a short break, and then we'll head down the road to the big halftime show.
Here at Guam Auto Spot, we have the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars. Like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage, as low as $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Or this 2021 Buick Encore, as low as $237 per paycheck, 0 down for 72 months. Call 478-AUTO to schedule a test drive or get pre-approved online at GuamAutospot.com.
You know all those amazing photos and videos saved on your camera roll capturing your love for Guam? We want to see it. Log on to visitguam.com/Instagram to submit your best moments for a chance to win weekly prizes. The Guam Visitors Bureau will choose a weekly winner, so share your love for our island paradise now and win. Brought to you by GVB. Thank you for making Guam a better place to live, work, and visit.
Okay, so here we go. Let's finish up Jimmy Cutney here, and we can get into the card after the big halftime show. So apparently the Post and the PDN are operating on similar wavelengths today because the Post title is "Don't Delay Seeking Medical Help for Prolonged Fatigue, Difficulty Breathing." Several people over the last week have been brought to Guam Guam hospitals too late to be revived, as the more aggressive Wuhan virus Delta variant deals our community a devastating setback. The Delta variant causes the unvaccinated to get sick more severely, and more Wuhan virus-linked deaths were among residents who haven't been immunized against the virus that causes the disease, local officials said. Even with a high vaccination rate, 113,000 Guam residents, or nearly 83% of the age eligible, have been vaccinated. The Delta variant had set us back from strides made earlier this year when the vaccines were first rolled out for the masses. From the latest infection rates and fatalities, the pandemic has made a turn for the worse in our community in some ways. Last week, we saw positive tests at a rate of 200 to 300 in a day, from a handful just a few months ago. On September 8, 4 deaths linked to Wuhan virus were reported from Naval Hospital. 5 days later, on Monday, the government of Guam confirmed 8 people died of Wuhan virus-linked deaths over the weekend. And another fatality earlier this month has also been linked to Wuhan virus. In less than a week, Guam's death toll increased by more than a dozen, to the new total of 168 deaths linked to Wuhan virus, according to GovGuam on Monday. Despite the vaccination success, our island has not been freed from the grip of this pandemic. The virus that causes Wuhan virus is going to be with us for the foreseeable future, said the governor. Governor Leon Guerrero emphasized that vaccination can reduce the number of people getting severely sick or dying. Most of the people that are in the ICU are not vaccinated. Most of the people that are on ventilators are not. We're seeing death on arrivals that are not vaccinated, and we've seen longer duration of hospital cases among patients who are not vaccinated. So my point is, we have the tools that we are already using to protect our people as much as we can, and to balance also some kind of, she says, normalcy. I think she means normality in our lives. We are all familiar with the 3 things that are easy to do to keep the Wuhan virus spread from getting worse. Proper mask wearing that fully covers the nose. Frequent hand sanitizing and washing. Keeping a safe distance of at least 6 people outside of your household. So if your household is doing all the above and has been vaccinated, and somehow the Delta variant still has pierced your shield, there are some critically life-saving actions that can be taken, as shared in Monday's press conference with the governors and health officials. If someone had difficulty breathing and experienced fatigue over the 5 days, they need to get medical help immediately, according to health officials. Some of the patients who were brought to the hospitals dead on arrival lost oxygen levels to a point of total failure before they could get medical help. Dr. Jolene Uggan with GMH was one of the officials who highly suggested getting a small gadget called pulse oximeter that measures the level of oxygen in a person. Any oxygen level below 95 should prompt people to get medical help, health officials said. Silent hypoxia. There are also times when someone's breathing does not offer clues that they are losing oxygen to dangerous levels in a phenomenon called silent hypoxia, a condition when oxygen levels in the body are abnormally low, which can irreparably damage vital organs if gone undetected for too long, according to a study by Boston University biomedical engineers on what causes this phenomenon. Despite experiencing dangerously low levels of oxygen, many people infected with severe cases of Wuhan sometimes show no symptoms of shortness of breath or difficulty breathing. Hypoxia's ability to quietly inflict damage is why it's been coined silent. According to the university in an article about the study written by Jessica Colarossi, if a pulse oximeter is not within reach, people are advised to get medical help immediately. I had an idea, Jose. You know, when you go into restaurants and they've got this thermometer there and they want you to use that alcohol hand wash, maybe that would be a good place to have a couple of pulse oximeters, right?
Because obviously the thermometer is just there for show.
Obviously, yeah. Nobody pays any attention to it. And it gives me the opportunity to come up with a really corny line. I look at it and I read it and I say, 97 degrees, cool. Since 98.6 is supposed to be normal, anything cooler than that. Of course, you know, for me, it's kind of like redundant, isn't it? Everybody knows I'm cool anyhow.
Well, that's because the atmosphere is thinner up there, Bob.
That's very true, yeah. The higher you go, the colder it gets. Public Health advises those who are in health distress to call 911. Public health clinics can also help people who need to check their oxygen levels. Okay, that's the post for today. So the key word for today, the word of the day is oximeter.
Dueling oximeters.
Yeah, dueling oximeters. So, okay, we got about 5 more minutes to the big halftime show. It's what I got on the card today. I've got more United States versus Cortec. I've got Public Law 3436 versus the Guam Board of Education and GITA. G, as you were, critical race theory versus free markets. I'm going to finish up Critarchy versus democracy, Frankenstein versus the village, and the U.S. versus the retirement fund. But I think before I plunge into that, I'll just take a run down Facebook here and see who's here and what they're talking about. So we got Brad Wood. We've got Troy Torres. Buenas, Troy. We've got Sandra Regis, one of our regulars. Kim Aiken. And Elizabeth Mendiola Kisitso. Sandra Regis, who says we need some common sense at Adeloop. And maybe I could bottle some up and send it down there for him. We've got Carl T.C. Gutierrez. Now, back during the campaign in 2018, we had 3 Carls that used to call. We had a Carl, the governor, and our Carl. So today we doubled up on Carls. We had the Carl and our Carl. We've got Ismail Velez, who says, question everything and everyone. When in doubt, get a second, third, and fourth opinion. Benjamin Franklin said there are only 2 things certain in life, death and taxes. Focus on what matters, as everything else is inconsequential. Oh, and Joe Biden. Talk about inconsequential. Jose Ted Pago Jr. says, improve mortality by buying a pulse ox. May as well put lamb's blood above my front and back door. And we've got Brad Wood. It's unfortunate of the losses. However, we were warned of 20,000 deaths. I think I remember.
We haven't made quota yet.
Yeah, way back in the beginning, as many as 20,000 people could die of this virus. Yeah. If we've got Jose Ted Pago Jr., if they were DOA, how do they know they didn't get the boop boop? What's the boop boop?
I don't know,
Yeah.
but it's funny just to hear it.
Yeah. And Rico Blanca Flores coming on saying good afternoon. And we've Jose Martinez, who reminds us of the Andrew Clause. And Sandra Regis, wish she would quit asking if people haven't done so already. Sort of figure they don't want to take it. Rico Blanca Flor, dead on arrival, quick, test for Wuhan virus. And then Jose Ted Pago Jr., bad Judge Napolitano was talking about natural law theory. What's the opinion from the Ministry of Truth, O wise one? Who is the Ministry of Truth? Is that me?
That would be you, sir.
That would be me, yeah. Natural law comes naturally, and it's the basis, really, of everything that conservatives believe, natural law. Okay, so big halftime show coming up.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Hurricane Nicholas comes ashore in Texas. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. About 25 miles southwest of Freeport, the storm had just been upgraded to a hurricane a few hours earlier. Sustained winds at 75 miles an hour, gusting as high as 95. In Houston, Police Chief Troy Finner warning,
stay off the roads. It's not safe tonight. We don't know how much rain is coming in. We can predict it, but it may be much more.
As much as 20 inches of rain is forecast. The National Hurricane Center warning areas along the coast of a dangerous storm surge that could push high water well inland. The number of power outages continues to grow. Now more than 150,000 customers left in the dark. Recall Election Day has arrived in California.
President Biden jumps into the fray on the eve of the Republican-backed recall election of California Governor Gavin Newsom.
Send a message to the nation. Courage matters. Leadership matters.
All right, coming up
Science
on 2 a.m.
matters.
here. Hi, I'm Mike Iskovitz here in the Weather Center. Good morning or good
The president
evening,
campaigning with the
depending on
governor
whether-
in Long Beach. Recall supporters are upset with the governor's handling of the coronavirus pandemic, but the president applauded the governor's actions. A loss for Newsom could have national implications as Republicans seek to win back control of Congress.
Fox's Carmen Roberts. 18 senior officials with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration have written a report claiming there's no evidence supporting the need for booster shots for people who've received the coronavirus vaccine. Published in the British medical journal The Lancet, the report says the fully vaccinated still have strong antibodies against the virus. 2 FDA officials have said they'll resign over the administration's plan to supply booster shots. Wall Street Monday, the Dow gained nearly 262 points. The S&P 500 added 10, while NASDAQ lost 10. Asian markets closing Tuesday mixed. Dow futures ahead modestly. America is listening to Fox News.
Hindi ang inyong bangko natapat sa serbisyo. Tunay na kaibigan at handa para sa inyo. Ang bangko ng kinabukasan, laging maaasahan. And Pacific, where others the branches we place through.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Brushing aside calls for his resignation, Secretary of State Blinken Monday defended the administration's handling of the Afghan pullout in testimony to the House Foreign Affairs Committee.
Secretary of State Blinken pushed back on suggestions the U.S. should have stayed in Afghanistan.
That would have been profoundly against our strategic interests and profoundly in China's strategic interests.
But the void left by the U.S. withdrawal is being filled by the group that once gave al-Qaeda a safe home as countries like China, Pakistan, Iran, and Russia cut deals to fill the vacuum.
Fox's Jennifer Griffin. Secretary Blinken admitted that Americans were left behind in Afghanistan, but declined to put a number on it. Florida Republican Congressman Michael Waltz, who served with the Special Forces in Afghanistan, telling Fox News at night.
We continue to hear just zero in terms of accountability, and we're not hearing anyone step up, especially for the families, the veterans, the Gold Star families, the victims of 9/11, and say, I made a mistake. This didn't go as well as it should.
For techies, it's all eyes on Silicon Valley today for Apple's latest offerings.
Apple's highly anticipated California streaming event, broadcast live from company headquarters in Cupertino, 10 a.m. Pacific time, when we're expected to see Apple's new iPhone lineup, including the iPhone 13 and the iPhone 13 mini, the Apple Watch Series 7, and possibly the company's new AirPods. Products that we're told will look similar to last year's models, though with some expected feature changes, improved camera, processor, and storage capabilities. New Apple products that also expect to come with hefty price tags. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
Apple is warning motorcyclists that vibration from their bikes could damage some features of the iPhone, suggesting riders not mount them to the handlebars without vibration dampening mounts. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Here at Guam Auto Spot, we have the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars. Like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage. As low as $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Or this 2021 Buick Encore. As low as $237 per paycheck, 0 down for 72 months. Call 478-AUTO to schedule a test drive or get pre-approved online at GuamAutospot.com.
You know all those amazing photos and videos saved on your camera roll capturing your love for Guam? We want to see it. Log on to visitguam.com/Instagram to submit your best moments for a chance to win weekly prizes. The Guam Visitors Bureau will choose a weekly winner, so share your love for our island paradise now and win. Brought to you by GVB. Thank you for making Guam a better place to live, work, and visit.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Well, another great halftime show here on Tall Tales. It means we're down in the second half of Tall Tales now. And I'm going to go to the card. And the first item on the card is more U.S. versus Cortec. And this all arises from a case that's not called U.S. versus Cortec, but the caption of the case is Michael J.B. Bora in his official capacity as Director of Land Management, and plaintiff versus Guam Waterworks Authority, a Guam public corporation, as you were, not versus, and Guam Waterworks Authority, a public corporation plaintiff intervener versus Cortec International Corporation, Yonex Enterprises Corporation. So what this suit is about is Michael Borja brought suit against Cortec International in order to correct what Michael Borja alleges is a mistake in a certificate of title issued to Cortec International showing that Cortec International owns certain real property in fee simple. Michael says, really, that property doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the waterworks. And that's why the waterworks filed a motion to become an intervener plaintiff, which was granted, and they are plaintiffs in the case also. Now, what happened here was the United States government owned some property. They let the waterworks build a sewage treatment plant on that property. The property was then deeded to the government of Guam in fee simple via quitclaim deed. And the government of Guam, in what I think is one of the most irresponsible things the government has ever done, gave the land back to what everybody wants to call the original landowners. Not the original landowners, but the pre-condemnation landowners, which in this case was a group of members of the Torres family who sold it to Yonex, who sold it to Cortec, who got a certificate of title that said that they owned the property. It turns out that that the waterworks claimed that it owned the property because it had got it from in a deed from the United States government. Now, the United States government comes along and files a statement of interest in this case. They're not parties, but they do file a statement of interest. And they say, as between Michael Borja, the Waterworks Authority, and Cortec, we don't care who wins. But you got to know this, folks. When we gave this land to the government of Guam, it was on the condition that we used for a public purpose. Giving the land to the Torreses was not a public purpose. And the language of the deed held that if the land was not used for a public purpose, it immediately reverted to the United States. Therefore, neither Cortec nor the Waterworks actually owns that land. Cortec has said that they own the land that this northern wastewater plant is on. They have a counterclaim for inverse condemnation, rent, all kinds of things that are saying, hey, you guys build on our land without our permission. Troy Torres uncovered this and put together a long, detailed article that I delved into the other day. A very well-written article. 3 cheers for Troy, because the Daily News and the Post probably don't even know this is going on unless they read Candid News. And if you don't read Candid News, there's a real good chance you aren't going to know what's going on in our island from time to time. So Troy now has come on with an encore. And the encore is titled this: what other lands can the federal government take back? Because if the federal government is right with this statement of interest, any of these lands that were given by the United States to the government of Guam for use as a public purpose that were given back to the pre-condemnation owners, they'd be in the same situation as this land where the Northern Wastewater Treatment Plant is built. So here's what Troy says. The federal government a few years ago was one conversation from taking back the Tijan property it had deeded to Gov Guam that scores of families now live on. For many property owners who receive land returned by the military to Gov Guam and then quitclaimed to them through the ancestral lands process, a question lingers. Will the federal government take the land back? This isn't an issue of politics, colonialization, or even eminent domain. For many properties that have been quitclaimed by the Ancestral Land Commission to the successors of the pre-condemnation owners of the land, most of the condemnations happening prior to 1951, this is very much a legal issue. Behind each of those quitclaim deeds from Gov Guam to the so-called ancestral landowners is not just a history of land taking and land use by the federal government, but legal instruments that commanded the land be used for public benefit in perpetuity. Many of the deeds of conveyance applicable to parcels of land that ended up being quitclaimed to private landowners contained a reversionary clause that essentially states that if the land is not used for a public purpose, title to the property automatically forfeits back to the federal government. There's good news and there's bad news. The good news is the federal government has not often exercised the reversionary clause. The bad news is it seems the federal government wastes no time threatening to take land back when it deems necessary. Translation: if your property has a U.S. government reversionary clause attached to it, the feds can take your land at any time. A recent filing by the United States Attorney for Guam and the CNMI in the Superior Court of Guam gives a glimpse into when the federal government means business with that reversionary clause. In December 2019, Michael Bora, in his role as director of the department, no, he's not the director of the Department of Land Management. He's the director of land management, Troy, filed a civil lawsuit in local courts to change what DLM asserted was a mistake made in the title certificate of Lot 10184 Dedido, also known as the multi-million-dollar Harmon Annex, which is adjacent to Two Lovers Point. By the time of the lawsuit, Cortec had already bought and was developing most of the property on Lot 10184. The problem is that one of the divisions of the lot which Cortec has asserted, and the certificate of title bears out, it purchased for millions of dollars from the previous owner, was Lot 10184-7. That's the sliver of property where the Northern Wastewater Treatment Plant and its pipeline to Camp Bloss sits. Cortec's purchase of the land, its claims on the title, and an audit claiming the loss and destruction of land documents culminated in a 2019 counterclaim on the land by Cortec and request for inverse condemnation of the property. The United States has a particular interest in the resolution of this case because Cortec's counterclaims threaten to adversely impact the chain of title of real estate title under which the United States reserved a reversionary interest in the real estate if not used for public benefit, specifically a wastewater treatment plant that serves U.S. facilities at Anderson and Marine Corps Base Camp Bloss. The U.S. Attorney's Office statement in the local court land suit states, the USAO statement does not contemplate fault for how Gov Guam and Cortec arrived at dispute, but it does state repeatedly that if in fact Gov Guam released property interests such a transaction is void, and the land would revert back to the ownership of the military. Quote, because the United States has a reversionary interest in parcels it conveyed to Gov Guam that is triggered upon cessation of use for public benefit, conveyance of those parcels without encumbrance by a public use benefit, that is the plant, would have caused title to revert to the United States. The USAO statement reads, the problem began long before Cortec bought the property. In its statement, the United States Attorney's Office explained to the court that the U.S. government in 1980 granted GovGuam an easement subject to the construction of the proposed Northern Integrated Sewage System Treatment Plant designed to serve the Department of Defense as well as U.S. government agencies in the northern district of the island of Guam. Parcel 4, or what now is known as Lot 10184-7, was outleased specifically for the plant's construction. In 2002, the U.S. conveyed the Harmon Annex, including 1084-7, to GovGuam so long as grantee uses the property for public benefit use as contemplated by the Guam Accessed Lands Act. And there's a public law citation. Should grantee use the property for other than such use, title to the property shall revert to grantor. 4 years later, in 2006, the Ancestral Lands Commission conveyed the entire property to the Torres estate via quitclaim deed. In 2 transactions that occurred over the next 2 years, the Torres estate told the properties, including the land where the wastewater treatment plant sits, to an investor. Cortec acquired the property the following decade. The public benefit condition of the lease of the gift to the Navy to the government of Guam wasn't just placed on Lot 10184-7, but on the entirety of Lot 10184. It's conceivable the federal government can take back the entire Harmon Annex if the law is interpreted in such a way that return of land to the pre-condemnation owners and their heirs was not in the public interest or for public benefit. And it's not just the Harmon Annex. As mentioned at the start of this article, the federal government was ready to pull the title on the properties it gave back to GovGuam when it closed Naval Air Station in the 1990s. In consideration for the deed of conveyance of essentially Tijan, the Fed said GovGuam must build an access road connecting Route 8 to the airport access road, or title would revert back to the USA. GovGuam for decades did not build that road and instead deeded the properties in the direct way of the proposed easement to the heirs of the pre-condemnation owners. It took years of negotiations among the governor's office and the Federal Aviation Administration and transacts with landowners to clear the way for what we now know as Magahaga Highway in order to satiate the feds from taking the land back. The assumption that land quitclaimed by the government of Guam to an ancestor land claimant is free and clear of any obstruction to title comes from a law the United States Attorney references in the Cortex Statement of Interest, Public Law 22-145. That law, enacted by the 22nd Guam Legislature in 1994, states, it's the intent of this act to ensure that lands condemned by the federal government and returned to the government of Guam pursuant to Public Law 103-339 are rightfully used in a fashion that benefits all original owners, their heirs, and others defined in 21 GCA, Chapter 75. So it looks like we have a public law that flies directly in the face of the reversionary clause. Then Governor Adda signed the act into law days before leaving office on December 29, 1994. In a cover letter informing the legislature of his approval, he entered into the record a warning about the new law. While we may not agree with and could debate forever the inappropriateness of such requirements, the fact is that this is a U.S. condition for the return of 3,200 acres of property the U.S. has not designated for return to Guam. The requirement the governor referenced was a detailed plan for public use as specified in 3C of Public Law 103-339. In fact, the Senate report of the federal statute, while it was making its way through Congress, explicitly states the committee's intent that the public benefit use does not include the transfer of lands to the original landowners. Where does that leave the ancestral landowners who presently possess a quitclaim deed from the government of Guam that has a built-in reversionary clause from the deed conveying the property from the federal government to Gov Guam? Will the U.S. attorney become the boogeyman of ancestral lands along the slippery slope Michael Bora lined when he brought suit against Cortec? An interesting question. Well, I've got a workup here, kind of like who screwed up, that I got from another interested attorney. Let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, but I lost. Who did I have that I lost?
The first caller, Martinez.
Yeah. Martinez.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you can call back, Martinez. I'm going to hold up on this for a second to take the callers. I've got another Joe on Afghanistan. End of the program, another Joe. Martinez, if you want to talk about this land matter, call us back. So here's the workup. It starts out, and this writer outlines U.S. government negligence, Gov Guam negligence, and Cortec and other private property owners' responsible steps. Prior to 2002, the U.S. government owned the underlying land subject to the encumbrances of the lease and easements. If the continued operation and access of the Northern Wastewater Treatment Plant was so critical, they could have carved those lands out of the annex and only transferred the non-encumbered lands. That would have preserved their reversionary interest in the leased and easement-burdened lands. Second bite of the apple for the U.S. government attorneys, as part of the 2002 transfer of lands from the U.S. government to Gov Guam, they could have required Gov Guam to grant them back rights to the previous leasehold land and the previous easement, both of which terminated in merger on the 2002 transfer. And I mentioned this before. Land tenure, land conveyancing is extremely complicated, because it's been something we've been working on for over 1,000 years. It goes back to the feudal days of England. It's customs and traditions all packed into a body of law. It's not something that a group of smart people sat down with their lawyers and figured out how to do. So one of the rules is something called merger by deed. If A owns A owns Blackacre and B owns Whiteacre, and A has an easement of access over Whiteacres, allowing him to drive from Blackacre across Whiteacre, and then A buys Whiteacre, the easement disappears. It's called merger by deed. And a subsequent buyer of Blackacre is not going to be able to get that, it's not going to be able to use that deed because it disappeared because of merger by deed. Very tricky. And then there's government of Guam negligence. From 2002 to 2006, Gov Guam had ample time to survey and carve out the leased land or any land and attach easements. If Guam so wished, at any time they could have granted property rights to the U.S. government or to Guam Water Works Authority, since the government of Guam owned it. Instead, like the U.S. government, they did nothing to secure any future interest in the previously leased and easement-burdened lands. They sat on their hands and allowed their opportunity to remedy their problem lapse. Unlike the U.S. government and GovGuam, the private property owners did everything right. They paid millions of dollars for their property rights. They secured a certificate of title from GovGuam that listed any encumbrances. There were none. And now, 15 years later, after CTI has expended millions of dollars acquiring and improving the land, GovGuam and the U.S. government show up claiming that they never intended to actually transfer certain lands. Sorry, it's a little too late. Those negligent officials need to fess up to their sorely created mess and pay for their damage. So this is a really important story. It's important. It's important for ratepayers. I'll come back to this, but we got to go to Wrigley Field first.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
So here we are, Wrigley Field, still talking about the United States government and reversion of lands, etc. I just popped a peek at Facebook here during the seventh inning stretch, and the question arises, how do we know that these DOAs really died of COVID? I don't think there was an autopsy performed. We don't have a medical examiner. No one has explained to us the protocol of how you determine that a corpse has COVID, or is this just an assumption? Someone came to the hospital and he was dead when he got there. Well, it must have been COVID. We have a public relations officer at the Department of Public Health and Social Services. We have a director of communications at the governor's office. Neither of them does a whole lot of communication. They put together press releases. It becomes the news over at PNC, and that's about it. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up on how did I caption that? U.S. versus Cortec. This is an extremely serious matter. Because if Cortec wins, if Cortec prevails, that means that we've built a sewer treatment plant on their land. And if that's the case, they're not going to make us take it down. They're not going to make us move it. But they're not going to be generous, charitable people and say, well, you know, we use the toilet too, so go ahead and just leave it there. It's okay. They're going to say, you build on our property. You owe us big time rent, waterworks. And of course, if the United States flexes its muscles and says, Cortec, you're out of here, and Cortec could take all of Parcel 4. I'm sorry, the U.S. government could take all of Parcel 4. And the implication of Troy's article here is that all of this land that as so blithely stated was given back to the original landowners, it could all come back to the United States government. And it's interesting, you know, a territory that's a couple $2 billion in debt can't give away its assets fast enough. All of the land that went to the Chamorro Land Trust leaseholds, what a boondoggle that turned out to be, was government of Guam property, all of which was property that the naval government abandoned to the government of Guam when the naval government packed up and left. So it was all public property. So the government of Guam took public property, some, you know, I know a little bit of it, Jose owns a little bit, everybody who's lived here has a stake in public property, and created this mechanism to give it to private persons. An extremely flawed mechanism, but a mechanism nonetheless. And then we have what happened with the land that the United States government took by eminent domain, decided it no longer needed the land anymore. And when that happens, the way it works is this. The United States government doesn't need land anymore. First thing it does, it offers the land to other federal agencies. That's how we got our wildlife refuge, where a former naval installation called NAVFAC used to be. And if no federal government agency wants it, then we offer it to state and local governments. And that's how we got it. We were a state or local government. But the United States government doesn't give it to us with the hope that we'll be spendthrifts and piss it all away. It's supposed to be used for a public purpose. Now, I know that the United States condemned large chunks of property at the beginning of World War II, like Fort Hood, Texas. That was like 6 different towns within the borders of Fort Hood. Same thing that happened in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, which is really in Tennessee. I don't know about I suppose one could research the other military bases, but the United States came in and really quickly packed those up. And I don't know of a single case. Now, I haven't looked really hard, but I don't know of a single case where the United States owned real property in fee simple and then gifted it back to the pre-condemnation owners, which is what we did here.
That was 1994.
Yeah. So if you look at the history of the condemned lands, you start out when the United States originally took the property by eminent domain. The Constitution says that no private property shall be taken for a public purpose without the payment of just compensation. So everyone whose real property was condemned after August 1, 1950, received what a court determined was just compensation. Before that, during the naval administration, not so much. It was not very well done. So, but a lot of folks think that the way it works is this. Well, yeah, they took our land and they gave us money for it, but we're mad because we didn't want them to take the land, therefore. And unfortunately, there's nothing that follows the therefore. Now, if you look at the condemnation clause in the Fifth Amendment, the United States condemnation, you'll find that what you're looking for isn't there. And it says, Article Fifth Amendment, my pages are loose here. nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Now, like everything else in the Bill of Rights, these are negative rights. They protect you from the federal government, from the national government. And there's nothing in the Constitution that says the national government can take your property by eminent domain. It's what's called an incident of sovereignty. A sovereign nation has the ability to take the property within its borders by eminent domain. And an awful lot of countries don't pay just compensation. This was the reason that we were so active in the Caribbean and in Central America and to a certain extent South America. We didn't want the wrong guys to take charge and use what's called expropriation to take American property, which is what happened, for example, in Cuba. A lot of American property, Castro expropriated it, didn't pay a nickel for it. We didn't want that to happen to American investment. But when the property on Guam was condemned after August 1, 1950, just compensation, as determined by the court, was paid, even though the property owners didn't want the property to be taken. In 1978, we paid for the land again. Our delegate to Congress, Antonio Wanpat, was able to get a statute through Congress requiring the national government to look at every one of the condemnations and determine whether or not they were, quote, fair. No need to put on proofs or anything like that. The United States government paid out another chunk of money to people whose lands were condemned. So we paid for the land. The United States government paid for the land twice, and then it gave the land back to the government of Guam. 3 transactions. And the government of Guam then gives it to the pre-condemnation landowners, many or most of whom sold it for huge amounts of money. And now, there's a possibility that some rather large black chickens are going to come home to roost if the United States government says, whoops, we kind of want to get that land back. So this is not a very pretty picture. What is the compulsion here for our local government to be so generous with public property, to keep giving it away, even in the face of that reversion clause in the lease? Now, I remember after the NAS came back to the government of Guam in 1995, we had some planning sessions where government officials came up with these grandiose plans of how we were going to use former Naval Air Station, and of course none of them ever went anywhere because we gave some of the land away. Not too long ago, the lieutenant governor said in a statement to the press, now we find that we have to tell people why we've got to purchase their land again. And I did a FOIA, and what I found out was this, that the airport and the government really wants to proceed on widening what's now called Magahaga Highway. But of course, the adjacent lands are not government lands anymore. So the airport asked the Federal Aviation Administration, won't you go out and use your power of eminent domain and condemn that land so we can build the road? And the Federal Aviation Administration says, we're not going to condemn land that we gave you once and you gave back. So here we are, a government that is so deeply in debt, and we can't give away our assets fast enough to make everybody happy. Okay, so I'm going to keep a close eye on this one. I suspect that the story is not over. The lawsuit still pens. Let's go to Churchill Downs, and when we come back, I'll entertain another Joe.
Contact Express Financial for all your financial needs. Express Financial is consumer lending at its very best. They also have a host of dealer service programs with quick approvals. There are 3 ways to apply. Over the phone at 637-9834. You may visit their office in person at 600 Harmon Loop Road across the street from Costules. Or you can also visit their webpage and apply at myexpressfinancial.com. In most cases, you'll get your money the same day. Mescla, read all about it. Check out Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tumon for lunch. Serving up some savory seafood specials such as spicy garlic shrimp, candied salmon, or better yet the local favorite, snapper or shrimp escabeche. Available only during lunch hours. Make sure to come down and try these tasty specials and more. Call 969-2652 for more info or to make a reservation. Located at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon, Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. A true taste of Guam.
So here we are. Marta, as you were, another Joe wanted to talk about, what was, it's been so long I forgot what he wanted to talk about. Afghanistan, okay. There's no compact impact for Afghanistan, another Joe.
Hopefully not, Uncle Bob. All right, I can't resist to bring up that, by the way, this is the Democrat administration that's attempting to, or requesting rather, that the FAA declare eminent domain. Is that right?
Yeah.
So everyone that's out there in a few months starts the campaigning for the 22 elections. Remember, it's a Democrat administration. The majority Democrats that are attempting to declare or attempting to get the FAA to declare eminent domain, take away property that they gave away to widen roads. Just want to make that point. Thank you for. And then Afghanistan is the reason I called. Uncle Bob, people keep saying we lost a 20-year war. We didn't lose a 20-year war. It was a failed evacuation and withdrawal of military and abandoning of our citizens as well as a democratically elected government of Afghanistan. So we basically turn our back on an ally, a democratically elected ally, which isn't lost on our NATO allies, Uncle Bob, in so many different ways, so to speak. I've been observing news clips and word of mouth is that this administration has done a lot of harm to our diplomatic relations internationally with our allies, our NATO allies, and I really can't. It's really frustrating when they keep saying we lost a 20-year war. No, this is not, and they keep trying to compare it to Saigon. It's not even the same thing. Right now, if you look at the news coming out of Afghanistan, they are protesting the Taliban. These are people who were born 20 years ago in Afghanistan, have no comprehension of what the Taliban's about. These are Afghans. They're going and playing video games in internet, in Wi-Fi cafes. I don't know what to think about. Does that make sense? Anything I just said?
Well, we always go into these wars and never really figure out what a victory would look like. We never think in terms of the end game. And that's exactly what happened. We went into Afghanistan on a counterterrorism mission. We're going to go in there and we're going to find the bad guys in Afghanistan and take them out of action. But then after we got there, we decided, well, we should do some nation building. And a few days ago, I had an article that showed about all of the woke agendas that we tried to put in place in Afghanistan. We wanted a third of their representative Congress to be women. And in order to do that, women that didn't even live in the districts had to be elected. You know, in other words, we tried to take some of our own loony ideas and transplant them to Afghanistan. Those things can happen, you know. The culture of one country can sort of bleed into another one, but you can't do it on the tip of a bayonet. So what we did is we spent an awful lot of blood and treasure, and when we got to the end of the 20 years, we really didn't have much of anything to show for it. And then our president screwed it up royally by not even... He should have been really good at retreating, because obviously that was kind of his makeup. But the pulling out was as disastrous as anything we've probably ever seen in the United States. But I could expect no less from Joe Biden. I said from the very beginning, when he and Harris appeared to be the ones that were going to win the election, I objected to them. Not because of their politics, not because of their loony ideas, but because I didn't think they packed the gear for the offices that they were going to take over. You know, it's like taking somebody who's had 15 lessons in a Piper Cub and letting him fly a 747. They just don't have the what we used to refer to in the military as G2 intelligence. They're not smart enough to hold down the offices that they hold down. And we're going to pay the price for it for the next at least 4 years. And I've explained to friends who are on the other side, and one of the things that liberals want to do is they want to shame conservatives. You really like Trump when he's this and he's that and he's everything else and he's a womanizer and on and on and on. And my standard explanation is that with respect to those criticisms, I just enter a demurrer, a common law pleading which said, even if we assume that everything that you say is true, it doesn't entitle you to relief. You're still not right. Because Trump was so much better than the alternative that it was no contest. And we're seeing it now. Trump wouldn't have screwed it up this bad. There's just no getting around it. But, you know, democracy, I think Winston Churchill said democracy is the worst form of government of all, except for everything else.
Yep, that's about right.
Mm-hmm. So that's what I think about it, another Joe.
Is there at least 30 seconds for one more thought, or you got to go?
A 30-second thought, I can handle it, yeah.
Right. So if this guy Biden is that weak and indecisive with regards to military action against the terrorist organization, the Taliban, and their cohorts, partners in crime, Al-Qaeda, then we shouldn't have to worry about him using our military against our own people. So if you don't want to get vaccinated, don't. What's he going to do, write an angry letter to us? Because if he does any more than write an angry letter to us, then it just proves how much he's un-American, because he's unwilling to take military action against terrorist safe haven that's going to come back and bite us in the butt by attacking us and our allies' interests. Thanks for your time, Bob. I'll just keep listening.
All right. Well, you know, I understand that Joe Biden has taken all of the tigers in the Washington, D.C. zoo and shipped them all back to India. He said, we don't need those. We've got paper tigers. Yeah. Okay, so we got about 8 more minutes heading down the home stretch here, Churchill Downs. And from Churchill Downs, I mean. And the next item on the card, I'm going to read a couple things to you. I'm reading a notice in the Post, Guam Education Board regular monthly meeting, Tuesday, September 21, 6 p.m., third floor conference room. Agenda, 1, call to order. 2, approval of minutes. 3, public participation. 4, communications. 5, ex officio member reports. 6, unfinished business and committee reports. 7, new business. 8, executive session. 9, adjournment. Anything wrong here, Jose?
That whole thing was wrong. It just was, it might as well just say we're having a meeting.
Yeah.
There's no specifics.
Really. It's the same agenda that they run every single time that there's a meeting. Let's start out with executive session. You can't just put executive session in your agenda unless you're really going to have an executive session. You don't just put it there in case you need it. If you're going to have an executive session...
That's a fail-safe.
Yeah, right. If you're going to have an executive session, you have to tell what the executive session is about. Now, I saw one for the retirement fund the other day to discuss litigation in a case that's going to be on the card here in a little while, the USERRA case, right? That's how you do it. Because in order to have an executive session, you've got to have a court reporter on board. Counsel has to certify that an executive session is appropriate and necessary, and there has to be a majority vote to do an executive. You just don't put it in your agenda. So that's wrong. And then the second thing that is wrong is Public Law 34-36 says that the items to be discussed must be set out in enough detail to put the public on notice as to what's going to be discussed. So if it's communications from who? Joe Biden? Hamid Karzai? And then it says ex officio member reports. Well, you've got to tell who the ex officio members are and what their report's going to say. Unfinished business, same thing. What committee reports? New business. So Public Law 34-36 was enacted on the 6th, as you were, the 11th of June. And it was not effective for 30 days to give government agencies time to get geared up to do this right, which obviously they didn't do. And the downside here is that when the board considers business, for instance, new business, maybe that's a contract to hire a new superintendent. If that's what they do, every action that they take is void, ab initio, because they didn't follow the law. GITA, here's the GITA issue. GITA announcement. The regular board meeting via Zoom and in the GITA conference room, etc. For the link request for persons requiring, as you were, for the link request or persons requiring special accommodations, please contact GITA's coordinator, Jennifer Calvo Guzman. And then it says the meeting will be streamed live on GITA's YouTube channel. And it doesn't even say that there is an agenda. Now, GITA deals with some really important stuff, some big buck stuff. And I've explained this before, that when lawyers bring suit on these technicalities, a lawyer bringing suit on this violation wouldn't care a nickel for the open government law. But if he's securing or protecting his client's interest, he'll grab on every technicality that he can to set aside the action taken in that meeting. And that's the teeth. We're kind of like Texas here. We're letting the public enforce our laws. But such a round of non-compliance. Where was the governor's director of communications on this? Was a circular sent out on the 12th of June saying, hey, folks, We've got a new public law here. When you're putting your agendas together, this is what you must do. Counsel in the governor's office, the attorney general, anybody but me? Oh, they're beating this drum? So this could, again, have some really serious results when these boards take action that some smart lawyer is going to want to set aside because they didn't comply with the law. There are even criminal sanctions for people who knowingly violate the open government law.
Well, let's pray they're not a tall tailgater.
Yeah, well, to ascribe knowledge of anything to these boards and commissions, I think is really something of a stretch. Okay, so that's it for another day. We'll come back tomorrow for more Tall Tales. We'll see you then.
KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Nicholas ashore in Texas. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The Category 1 hurricane making landfall just over 2 hours ago, southwest of Freeport, Texas.
We're expecting heavy rain of 6 to 12 inches over a large portion of the upper Texas coast with isolated maximum amounts of 18 inches. This could cause life-threatening flash floods across portions of the upper Texas coast into far southwestern Louisiana.
Senior hurricane specialist Eric Blake at the National Hurricane Center. The storm has left 220,000 customers without power. President Biden in California Monday evening campaigning against the recall of Governor Gavin Newsom.
Folks, send a message to the nation. Courage matters. Leadership matters. Science matters. Vote to keep Gavin.
Earlier, Republican Larry Elder said the high-profile Democrats visiting the state are avoiding the governor's record.
They can't defend his record on fire management. They can't defend his record on the fact that we're having rolling brownouts. They can't defend his record on the fact that we are running out of water because we haven't added to our water infrastructure system in about 40 years.
The polls closed tonight.